The storm had clawed its way across the mountains for 3 straight days, raging like something ancient and angry. Trees splintered under the weight of winds. Rivers swelled until they turned into furious brown monsters, and the skies cracked open with lightning that lit up the valleys like a war zone. On the third night, the storm took more than just trees. The northern cliff face, brittle from days of saturation, finally gave way. Tons of rock, soil, and uprooted forests thundered down in a brutal landslide that tore through everything in its path. At the bottom of that destruction, where the mud settled like a suffocating blanket, an eagle lay trapped. A great bald eagle, once majestic, once ruler of the skies, now reduced to a shivering, broken creature smothered beneath a layer of wet earth and shattered branches. No one knew it was there. No one saw it fall. The eagle had been nesting on a rocky perch, overlooking the valley below, fiercely guarding a clutch of 2 eggs. For days it had fought the wind, shielding the nest with its massive wings, stubbornly holding on to the only future it had. But when the cliffs gave way, so did the nest. The eagle tried to fly, tried to save what it could, but the sky offered no mercy. A branch struck its wing, mid-flight, snapping bone like dry straw, hard. Then the mud came. Nature moved on, cold and indifferent, and the eagle, buried alive, waited in the silence, gasping through layers of dirt, wings twisted beneath the weight of the world. Days passed. In the small town nearby, life resumed in cautious pieces. Volunteers arrived. Search teams combed through debris, mostly focused on homes, people, places of human tragedy. Few had time to worry about the wildlife. Fewer still noticed the locals' stories that, before the storm, a giant eagle had been seen gliding over the ridge almost daily, its wings stretched wide like a shadow of freedom itself. But one man remembered. Jonah was a retired ranger who had spent most of his life protecting the forests. He had tracked that eagle for months, watching from afar as it chose its nesting site. He had whispered thanks every time he saw it, soaring above, a symbol of resilience in a world spinning too fast. When the landslide struck, Jonah had cried for the lost land. But in his heart, what haunted him most wasn't a broken house, was the silence in the sky. He knew something was wrong. So on the 4th morning after the disaster, while rescue crews turned their attention to infrastructure and roads, Jonah took his old truck, a weathered backpack, and his dog Roscoe, and headed toward the base of the cliffs. The trail was unrecognizable. What once was a path lined with pine and stone was now a ragged scar of mud and ruin. But Jonah pressed on. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe a feather, maybe nothing, maybe just closure. Instead, he found a miracle. It started with Roscoe. The dog stopped suddenly, ears alert, nose twitching. Then came the faintest sound, a broken whistle of air, more breath than cry. Jonah followed it, every step sinking into ankle-deep mud. He nearly missed it. But then, just beneath a fallen log, he saw Ita Talon, motionless, caked in grime. At first, he thought it was dead, but then it twitched. Just once. Jonah dropped to his knees. The mud was thick, clinging to everything, like tar. Carefully, with hands trembling, he began to dig. Inch by inch, feather by feather, the shape of the eagle emerged. Its head was tilted sideways, one eye sealed shut with blood and dirt. Its beak was chipped. In one wing, Jonah's stomach turned when he saw it was bent in a way that no wing should ever bend. "You held on," he whispered, voice cracking. "You damn beautiful bird. You held on." He called for help. The wildlife rescue team was skeptical at first. It was too dangerous, they said. The terrain was unstable. But Jonah didn't care. He refused to leave. He stayed with the eagle, shielding it from the sun, dripping water onto its cracked beak, speaking in soft tones like a father comforting a child. When the team finally arrived, they had to work with surgical precision. A single wrong move could break the eagle's spine. But they managed. They freed her. Jonah was sure it was female and laid her gently into a travel crate. She didn't resist. She had no strength left to fight. But her eye opened, just once, and it met Jonah's. Something passed between them in that moment. Not gratitude, not fear, just raw, undeniable will. The eagle was saying, in the only way she could, "I'm not done yet." They rushed her to a wildlife rehabilitation center 2 towns over. Vets took over. X-rays confirmed a fractured wing, several broken feathers, bruised lungs, and deep lacerations along her body. Her survival chances were low. But she was alive. That night, Jonah didn't sleep. He sat in the waiting area, clutching his hat like it was the last lifeline he had. The vet, a quiet woman named Dr. Alina, came to him gently. "She's stable for now, but we'll need to watch for infection. And even if she heals, she may never fly again." Jonah nodded. "Just keep her breathing," he said. "She's done her part. Now it's our turn." Recovery was a brutal road. The eagle, now named Valea, meaning from the valley, was wrapped in bandages and kept in a special enclosure with minimal stimulation. For days, she barely moved. Her body was healing, but her spirit seemed crushed. The sky had been taken from her, and every animal handler knew, once an eagle loses the sky, it often loses the will to live. But not Valea, not this one. One afternoon, a storm rolled in again, and the sound of rain hitting the metal roof made her eyes flick open. She stretched her good wing, just slightly, as if testing the air. Jonah was there. He had been visiting daily, bringing wild fish, cleaning feathers, sitting in silence when words wouldn't do. He saw the wing twitch, and he smiled. "There you are," he murmured. "You're still in there." Days turned to weeks. The fractures began to knit. The swelling went down. Valia began to eat on her own, her eyes sharpening with every meal. But the wing still wrapped, still fragile remained, her biggest battle. She would never hunt again. She might never fly, but she tried. Oh, she tried. Every time they opened the enclosure door, she shuffled forward, wings spreading awkwardly. She would leap half fall, half glide a few feet, then rest and try again. It broke Jonah's heart to watch, but it also lit something in him. Hope started filming her progress, posting updates online. The story spread. People across the country began following Valia's fight. Letters came in, donations. Children sent drawings. "You are stronger than the storm." One note read in crayon, next to a picture of an eagle with a lightning bolt behind it. And still, she fought. But one evening, something changed. Jonah arrived to find Valia slumped in a corner, feathers dull, breathing shallow. Panic surged. Dr. Alino explained that an infection had set in near the wing joint, the kind that hides until it's too late. They were trying antibiotics, but there were no guarantees. "We can try surgery," she said quietly, "but she might not survive it." Jonah looked through the glass at the bird who had taught him more about strength than any human ever had. "If there's a chance," he whispered, "we take it." That night, as Valia was prepped for surgery, Jonah stood by her enclosure, hand pressed to the glass. "You refused to die once," he said. "Do it again. One more time. Just one more." The door swung shut, the lights dimmed, and everything went still. The operating room buzzed with a tense silence. Every eye in the Wildlife Center seemed to hold its breath as Dr. Alina and her team prepared for the surgery. Valia lay completely still on the sterile table, her wings spread delicately under the surgical lamp, each broken feather a testament to her war with the earth. She had survived the landslide, the burial, the days without food or water, but now, beneath the cold tools of human hands, she faced her most dangerous test yet. Infection had spread dangerously close to the bone. The vet's fingers moved with the grace of someone who understood not just anatomy, but consequence. One slip, one hesitation, and the eagle would be gone. Jonah sat outside the operating room, unmoving, a silent statue of hope and desperation. He didn't blink, didn't speak, he barely breathed. The storm outside had returned, as if nature itself wanted to watch what happened next. Hours passed. The rain thudded against the roof, like distant drums. At last, the door creaked open, and Dr. Alina stepped out. Her scrubs were soaked with sweat, her eyes exhausted, but she nodded once. Recovery was slow and filled with uncertainty. Valia didn't move much in the days after the surgery. She slept, she healed, and Jonah stayed with her. The bond between them deepened, no longer just man and bird, but to survivors, one who had lost the sky, and one who had lost the rhythm of his life and found it again in feathers. Jonah spoke to her every day. He told her stories about the forest, about the people who sent messages, about the eagle-shaped weather vane that someone from Colorado had mailed to the center, saying, "This bird made me believe again." Valia would listen, eyes half closed, occasionally blinking slowly like she understood everything. Weeks passed. The scars began to fade, and her feathers started to regrow. Though she would never fully recover, there was a change in her posture and alertness, a weight behind her eyes. One day, as Jonah walked into her enclosure, she stood upright, raised her head, and spread her wings slow, shaky, but proud. She didn't fly, but she held them open, full and wide, like she was daring the world to doubt her. Jonah choked back tears. "That's my girl," he whispered. The Wildlife Center couldn't keep her forever. It wasn't designed for permanent care, but releasing her into the wild was impossible. Herwin, though healed, wouldn't survive a dive or a storm or a fight for food. A decision had to be made. Some argued for transferring her to a sanctuary across the state, but Jonah refused. "She doesn't need to be caged again," he said. "She needs to be seen. She needs to show people what survival looks like." So he built a home for her. On the land behind his cabin, beneath the open sky and near a ridge that overlooked the same valley where she once soared, Jonah constructed a vast open-air habitat. No bars, just wire above to keep predators out, and space below filled with grass, low perches, and pools of fresh water. Valia was moved there with a quiet ceremony, just Jonah, Dr. Alina, and the handful of staff who had been there since her rescue. As she stepped into the enclosure for the first time, she didn't pause. She moved forward with the same deliberate strength she'd shown when she pushed her talon out of the mud all those weeks ago. She climbed onto the highest perch and sat there, still, proud, watching the horizon. And that's when the sky responded. A juvenile eagle, wah, and full of unscarred strength, appeared above the ridge. It circled once, twice, then let out a sharp, piercing cry. Valia didn't answer, but her eyes followed the shape in the sky, not with envy but with memory. The young eagle flew off. Jonah watched her silently. "You remember, don't you?" he said. And maybe that's enough. People began to visit. The story had traveled across states, then countries. Families drove hours to see her. Children pointed and whispered. Adults stood in quiet reverence. Valia became more than a bird. She became a symbol of survival, of never giving up, of how even the fiercest can fall and still rise again. Jonah would tell her story to every visitor, but he always ended it the same way. She was buried under a mountain, and still she reached out, with one broken wing and a heart that wouldn't quit. Not everything healed cleanly. Sometimes at night, Valia would pace, restless. Rain still made her uneasy. She'd blink more, shift, stretch her wing in a nervous twitch. Trauma doesn't vanish. It lingers in the bones, but so does hope. And Valia had more of that than any creature Jonah had ever known. One crisp morning, months after her rescue, Jonah stood beside her enclosure, sipping his coffee. Valia was perched low that day, near the fence, her eyes watching the clouds. Jonah chuckled. "You still waiting on the wind to change?" She didn't blink. She just lifted her head. A breeze kicked through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and winter and something else possibility. And then, without warning, Valia leaped. It wasn't flight, not really, but it wasn't nothing, either. She surged up, using every ounce of strength she had, wings flapping in uneven rhythm, lifting her body just a few feet above the ground. She hovered shaking, determined and then landed hard. But she landed on her feet. Jonah was at her side in an instant, not to catch her but to smile. "Show off," he whispered. "Still got it." That evening, he posted the video. It went viral in hours. People wept, cheered, reached out to say how Valia had changed something inside them. The world didn't just see an eagle, they saw themselves. Everyone who had ever felt buried, everyone who had ever felt broken, and everyone who dreamed of rising again. Valia didn't fly again after that. But she didn't need to, because the sky lived in her eyes, now in every move, every breath, every moment she stood tall against the memory of mud. She had refused to die, and in doing so, taught thousands how to live. And Jonah, he no longer wondered about purpose. He woke each day to the sound of feathers rustling and wind in the pines. He tended the land, spoke to visitors, and thanked the world for sending him a second chance, wrapped in a broken wing. Valia never laid eggs, never soared, but she gave life in a different way. And every time someone asked if she'd ever fly again, Jonah would smile and say she already did. She just used her heart instead of her wings.